I stood by the window in the grand dining room of Harwood Manor, watching the soft drizzle that blanketed the overgrown garden. The glass was cold against my fingertips, my reflection staring back at me, a woman weathered by time and betrayal. At 68, my once vibrant spirit was cloaked by age, but my mind, sharp as ever, knew exactly what was at stake. The mansion with its high ceilings and faded tapestries stood as a silent witness to the years of hard work I had poured into building my empire. Now it felt like a prison, the walls closing in with every tick of the clock. And outside, the rain fell relentlessly, washing over the estate that was supposed to be my legacy. I turned away from the window and walked toward the long mahogany dining table. The chairs, polished and pristine, seemed out of place in the cold atmosphere of deceit that hung in the air. It was a family meeting, they said, a chance to discuss the future, they said, but I knew better. Arthur and Sophia, my children, had become strangers, their faces painted with a false sense of concern, their words laced with hidden agendas. They wanted my empire, my wealth, my years of sacrifice. They wanted everything that I had worked for without ever once stopping to consider what it all truly meant. Mom. We've been thinking. Arthur's voice cut through the silence, his tone soft but calculated. He sat across from me, his posture rigid, his eyes never quite meeting mine. I could already hear the rehearsed lines behind his words. He was a businessman after all. The kind of man who saw people as assets to be bought and sold, including me. You've been working so hard all your life. Maybe it's time to let go. Let us handle things for you. Sophia, sitting beside him, flashed a tight smile, her painted lips barely moving. She adjusted the diamond necklace around her neck, the same necklace I had given her on her wedding day. How naive I had been to think it was a token of love. Now it was just another symbol of the greed that ran through her veins. We're just trying to help Mom. You don't have to do it all yourself anymore, she said, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. I let the silence stretch, letting their words settle like dust in the corners of the room. The truth was, I'd heard it all before. They didn't care about my well-being. They didn't care about me. They only cared about what I could give them. And that was exactly why I had to act now before it was too late. I had spent years building this legacy, brick by brick. The law practice that had started as a small office in a rented space had grown into something extraordinary, something that had provided not just for me, but for so many others. The real estate investments, the businesses, the charities I had worked tirelessly without rest to create something that would outlast me. But now it seemed like it would all be ripped from my hands, sold off to the highest bidder. I had raised them, loved them, given them everything they asked for. Arthur had been the ambitious one, always looking for the next deal, the next big thing. Sophia had been the dreamer, the artist, the one who wanted the world to know her name. They had both been given the best of everything, the best schools, the best opportunities, the best of me. And yet here they were trying to strip me of everything I had worked for, all in the name of helping me. Have you thought about the future Arthur pressed? The estate, the business, the investments, they're all too much for you to manage on your own. It's time to let us take over Mom. It's for the best. The words stung. They stung in a way that only betrayal could. I had given them everything, and now they were treating me like a liability. They wanted to take over to control the very thing I had spent a lifetime building. And they were doing it with such ease, with such confidence, as though they were entitled to it all. I looked at them, at their polished exteriors, and I realized that I didn't recognize them anymore. These were not the children I had raised. These were strangers dressed in the clothes of ambition and entitlement. I felt a pang in my chest, a hollow ache that I had tried to ignore for so long. But I knew the truth. They didn't see me as their mother anymore. They saw me as a means to an end. They saw me as an obstacle to be removed. Mom, we know you've been a little confused lately, Sophia added, her voice coated with false concern. Maybe it's time to make things easier on yourself. Confused. That word. It hit me like a slap. How many times had I faked those memory lapses, those moments of forgetfulness just to see how long they would tolerate me? How long would they pretend to care before they showed their true colors? The answer, I now knew, was not long at all. I could feel my pulse quicken, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. They had already made their decision. They were ready to sell my empire, ready to cash in on years of hard work, all under the guise of helping me. But I wasn't going down without a fight, not when there was still time. Maybe I have been confused, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. But I'm not blind and I'm not stupid. I know exactly what you're trying to do. The room went still. Arthur and Sophia exchanged quick glances, their masks slipping for just a moment. I could see it in their eyes, the realization that their mother wasn't the weak, confused woman they thought she was. And in that moment, I knew I had them. I stood up, my legs a little unsteady, but my resolve stronger than ever. You think you've won, I said, my voice cutting through the tension, but you haven't, not yet. Their faces were masks of disbelief, but I wasn't done yet. I had been planning this for months, gathering the pieces, preparing for the moment when I would take back control. I wasn't just fighting for my fortune. I was fighting for my dignity, my legacy, and the respect I had earned over a lifetime of sacrifice. As I turned and walked toward the study, I felt a flicker of something inside me, a spark of determination that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't going to let them steal everything I had worked for, not without a fight. In the end, I would make them see me not as a confused old woman, but as the woman who had built this empire from the ground up. And I would make sure they remembered that. The next few days passed in a haze of half-hearted conversations, awkward silences, and strained smiles. Harwood Manor stood silent as though even the walls themselves were waiting for the storm to hit. My children were pretending like nothing had changed, like they weren't planning to take everything I had built and sell it off in pieces. But I knew better. I had always known better. This was just the calm before the storm. They had underestimated me, thought they could manipulate me into handing over control without resistance. They were wrong. Every night after dinner, I'd sit by the window watching the rain fall in sheets, the sound of it tapping against the glass, like a clock ticking away the time. I had already started preparing for what was to come. The documents were already signed and filed in a safe that no one knew about but me. The trust was set up a protective shell for the assets I had worked so hard to accumulate over the years. Carla, my lawyer and confidant for over 30 years, was the only one who knew about it. She had helped me structure everything in such a way that even if they tried to take over, they wouldn't be able to touch it. But there was more to my plan, much more. I wasn't going to let Arthur and Sophia believe they could walk all over me. I wasn't going to go quietly into the night pretending to be the frail, confused old woman they had painted me to be. No, this would be my final act of defiance, and it would be my last victory. They would come to realize that Harwood Manor wasn't just an inheritance, it was a legacy, and it was mine to protect. Each day I put on the mask of submission. I allowed them to visit me, to speak to me in that syrupy, concerned tone that only made my skin crawl. Arthur would sit across from me in the sitting room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, talking about his latest business deal, like I had nothing better to do than listen. Sophia would walk around the house in her designer clothes, pretending to be the daughter I had once hoped would carry on my legacy. But I saw through it all. The polished smiles, the forced conversations, the way they constantly mentioned their plans to help me with the estate. It was all just a prelude to what was coming. I could feel them closing in like vultures circling a dying animal. Every time Arthur made a casual reference to the future of Harwood Manor, every time Sophia dropped a hint about adjusting things to make life easier for me, I could see the greed in their eyes. It wasn't just about managing the estate anymore. It was about controlling it, about owning it. And they thought I wouldn't notice. But I had been preparing. I had always been preparing. It was early one morning, just as the sun was breaking through the clouds, that I made the decision. I called Carla. I needed her help. It was time to implement the final stage of my plan. I had already anticipated Arthur and Sophia's move. I had seen this coming for years. They were already arranging for a doctor to come and assess me, to declare me unfit to manage my affairs. They thought they could bypass my authority and take over everything in a single move, all while I was supposedly unaware of their scheming. But they had no idea what I was capable of. Carla arrived that afternoon. Her face was kind, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that made me feel like I wasn't the only one who had seen this coming. We went over the final details of the trust, double-checking everything, making sure every asset was protected. We discussed the next steps, the legal strategies, the documentation, the recordings I had made over the last few months of their whispered conversations about me. I had kept a secret file, a collection of their words, their lies. Every time Arthur or Sophia let something slip, every time they thought I was asleep or out of earshot, I had made a note. I had recorded everything, and those recordings would be the key to my victory. By the time Carla left that evening, everything was in place. The storm was coming, and I was ready. Over the next few days, the tension grew. Arthur and Sophia continued their charade, trying to act like concerned children, but their impatience was palpable. They were ready to move. They were already preparing the legal paperwork, arranging for a lawyer who would facilitate the transfer of my assets. They had become so sure of their success that they didn't even bother to hide their actions anymore. It was like they thought the game was already won, but it was far from over. It was just beginning. I called Carla again, telling her it was time. The first step was to meet with my lawyer and finalize everything. I needed everything in order before the confrontation. The next day, Carla and I sat down in my study going over the final legalities of my plan. The trust, the power of attorney, the documents that would protect my assets, all were in order. But there was one last piece to put into place. It was the most important one, the most dangerous one. At exactly 9 a.m. the next day, I was supposed to meet with Arthur and Sophia in the dining room. Carla would be there, as would my private investigator, the one who had been following their every move for the past month. It was all set. Arthur and Sophia had no idea what was coming. The morning arrived with a heavy sense of finality. As I made my way downstairs, I glanced out the window at the sprawling estate. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel a small sense of pride. Harwood Manor had been my life's work, my sacrifice. It wasn't just a house, it was a symbol of everything I had fought for. It was my legacy. Arthur and Sophia were already waiting in the dining room when I entered. They tried to look surprised to see me, as if they hadn't been planning this for months, as if they hadn't already made their decision to take everything from me. But I knew better. I had known for years what their plan was. It was time to take control. "Mom, you're looking well," Arthur said, standing up and offering me a glass of water. His eyes flicked nervously between me and Sophia. "We're just here to talk about the future, you know, about your plans." I could see the unease in his eyes, the way his voice wavered just slightly as he spoke. They were worried. They knew something wasn't right, but they didn't know how much I knew. They didn't realize that I had been watching them for months, studying their every move. Sophia looked at me with forced concern, her lips twisted into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We just want what's best for you, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "You've worked so hard. It's time to rest, to let us take care of things." I sat down slowly, carefully studying them both. This was the moment where I would expose everything, the moment where I would show them just how wrong they were about me. "I'm glad you finally came to see me, Arthur," I said, my voice calm, measured, "because I've been doing some thinking of my own. You're right about one thing. It is time for a change." Arthur and Sophia exchanged confused looks, clearly unsure where I was going with this. I took a deep breath before continuing. "I've already made the necessary arrangements," I said, leaning forward slightly, letting my words hang in the air between us. "Everything is already in place. I've been preparing for this moment for a long time, and now it's time for you to learn the truth." I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out a thick folder filled with legal documents, contracts, and photographs. I placed it on the table between us. Arthur's face drained of color as he leaned forward, his hand shaking as he reached for the folder. "What is this?" he demanded, but his voice lacked the usual confidence. I smiled softly, the years of anger and betrayal now bubbling to the surface. "This is the future, Arthur. This is the legacy that you've been trying to steal, and you'll never have it." With that, I opened the folder and slid the papers across the table. The truth was now in front of them. They had no idea what they had just walked into. The silence in the dining room was deafening. The only sound was the faint rustle of paper as Arthur slowly flipped through the documents I had laid out before him. His eyes scanned the first few pages, his brow furrowing as the weight of what was in front of him began to sink in. Sophia's face, usually a mask of cool detachment, now betrayed her shock. She reached out almost as if to steady herself, her fingers trembling as they brushed the edge of the folder. They thought they were in control. They thought they were the ones pulling the strings, that their careful planning and calculated moves had led them to this moment where they would take everything from me. But now it was my turn. "You've been planning this." Arthur finally spoke, his voice low, barely above a whisper. "You've been setting us up, haven't you?" His eyes flicked nervously between the papers and me, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by an unmistakable edge of fear. Sophia's lips parted, but no words came out. I could see her struggling to find a response, her mind racing as the truth unfolded before her. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I allowed them to feel the weight of the moment. I wanted them to understand the depth of their mistake, to comprehend just how wrong they had been to underestimate me. They thought they could push me aside, that they could play me like a pawn in their game. But I was no pawn. I had spent my life building something far greater than they could imagine. And now it was time for them to face the consequences of their betrayal. "You have no idea what you've done," I said finally, my voice steady but carrying the full force of the truth. "You've taken everything I built, everything I worked for, and twisted it into something I no longer recognize. And for what? For money, for control. Do you really think I don't know what you've been planning? I've been watching you both for months." Arthur's jaw clenched as he looked at me, but it was Sophia who finally spoke. "We were just trying to help Mom. You've been so out of it lately, and we just thought—" Her voice faltered the words, losing their conviction as they left her lips. I could see the guilt creeping in, but it was too late. The truth had already been exposed, and there was no going back. "Help," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what you call it? Helping me? Or was it helping yourselves to everything I've worked for? You didn't want to help me. You wanted to take everything I've spent decades building. You wanted to control it, to use it as your own personal piggy bank." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "That's not fair, Mom. You just wanted to take over to see how much you could get before I was gone." I interrupted her, my tone sharp. "You thought you could pretend to care about me while you counted my wealth behind my back. But here's the truth. You're not getting away with it. Not today, not ever." I could see Arthur swallow hard, his throat bobbing as if he were struggling to process what was happening. He had never been one for confrontation, always the type to sidestep, to manipulate from behind the scenes. But now, here he was, trapped in his own web of lies. Sophia, too, seemed rattled, the calm veneer of her socialite persona slipping away as her facade cracked. I watched as they exchanged a silent glance, each of them, trying to find some way out of this mess they had made. They had expected me to fold. They thought I was too old, too fragile, too weak to stand up to them. But I wasn't fragile. I wasn't weak. And I wasn't about to let them tear everything down. They hadn't realized how deeply I had studied them, how well I knew their patterns, their motivations. They thought they had me figured out, but they had underestimated me for the last time. "Look at me," I said, my voice rising slightly firm and resolute. "I've spent my entire life building this." This I gestured around the room, taking in the grand dining room that had once echoed with laughter and warmth, now cold with tension. This estate, this business, these investments, I built it from the ground up, and I did it without anyone's help. Not yours, not anyone else's. You were given opportunities, sure, but I didn't build this for you. I built it for me. They had spent their lives expecting things to be handed to them. They had been raised in the lap of luxury, spoiled by the comforts my hard work had afforded them. But none of that was ever truly theirs. Not the way it was mine. They had always seen it as their inheritance, but inheritance isn't the same as hard-earned achievement. They didn't deserve it. They had only taken from me, consumed what I gave, without ever thinking of the sacrifices that had gone into making it all possible. I didn't give everything for you to just steal it from me. I continued, my voice steady, as I walked around the table, looking at them both with unwavering resolve. I gave everything to build something that would last long after I was gone, something that would help people, real people who needed it. Not for you to turn it into your own personal fortune. Their faces had turned pale, the blood draining from their features as the weight of my words sank in. I wasn't some weak old woman who could be shoved aside, and I wasn't going to let them take what wasn't theirs. I had prepared for this moment, and I had spent years planning for the day when I would take back control of my life. This was my empire, and it was not up for grabs. "Look at this," I said, pulling a stack of papers from the folder. "This is the real plan, the one I've been working on in secret. You thought you could get away with it, didn't you? You thought I wouldn't notice what you were doing behind my back." I threw the papers on the table, and they scattered like leaves in the wind. This is the truth. The future of Harwood Manor. The future of everything I've worked for. And it's not going to you. Arthur's eyes went wide. "What the hell is all this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly, now the facade of calm falling away. We thought we were doing the right thing, Mom. We were just trying to take care of everything." "You were trying to take control, Arthur," I snapped. "You were trying to take everything." I took a breath, feeling the rush of adrenaline coursing through me. I've already arranged for the assets to be protected. I've already transferred the majority of the estate into a trust. The properties, the businesses, the investments, none of it is up for grabs anymore. You'll never see a dime of it, not unless you prove you've earned it. The silence stretched between us. They sat there frozen in disbelief as the full weight of the situation hit them. I had outplayed them, outsmarted them at every turn. They had thought they were the ones in control, but I had been the one pulling the strings all along. "I don't want to hear any more excuses," I said, my voice firm. "You want this estate? Then you'll work for it. You'll work like real people, not like entitled children who've never had to lift a finger in their lives. I've set up a foundation, a charitable organization funded by the estate. But if you want any part of it, if you want anything at all from what I've created, you'll have to prove to me that you can do something more than take." Arthur and Sophia exchanged a glance, and for the first time I saw the cracks in their confidence. I had just changed the rules of the game, and they didn't know how to react. "I'm giving you one last chance," I continued, standing tall and staring them both down. "If you want to inherit anything from me, you'll prove that you're worthy of it. Otherwise, you'll be nothing more than people who used me, took advantage of me, and lost everything." I could see it in their eyes. the shift, the realization that they had been caught, and the fear of the consequences. For the first time in years, they were seeing me not as a burden, not as a frail old woman, but as the force I had always been. And I wasn't done yet. The game had just begun. The days after the confrontation were a blur of meetings, calls, and tense silences. The tension in Harwood Manor was suffocating, and I could feel the weight of my own actions settling in. I had shown my hand, exposed my strategy, and I knew the hardest part was yet to come. Arthur and Sophia, despite their bravado, were reeling from the shock of what had just transpired. They had always thought they were the ones pulling the strings, the ones in control. But now they understood that the game had changed. Now they were on the defensive, and I had all the cards. I didn't expect them to take it well, of course. People like Arthur and Sophia never took defeat gracefully. They were used to having everything handed to them, used to getting what they wanted without ever having to truly work for it. They were blind to the realities of what it took to build something like Harwood Manor, to cultivate a legacy that wasn't just about money, but about creating something that lasted, something that meant something. I watched them from a distance, observing how they handled the fallout. The days turned into weeks, and yet they still hadn't fully grasped the gravity of the situation. Arthur Ever, the businessman, tried to fix things with charm and promises, telling me that he understood now, that he was willing to do what it takes. Sophia, on the other hand, was quieter, withdrawn, as if the reality of being cut off from everything she had ever known was finally sinking in. She didn't want to work. She didn't want to be part of something that didn't feed her vanity, her need for admiration and luxury. But they had no choice now. I had made my decision clear: they would prove themselves or lose everything. I had already begun the process of restructuring the estate, creating a new direction for the future, and I was determined to make sure they understood the true value of what they had taken for granted all these years. I had enlisted Carla once again, and we began preparing for the next phase. I wasn't going to let them off easy. The trust I had set up was ironclad, but the hardest part was making sure my children understood that the inheritance they had been so eager to claim wasn't going to come without sacrifice. The foundation I had created would be their test. They would need to work for their inheritance, but more importantly, they would need to work for the dignity and respect they had squandered. I could already see them beginning to crack under the pressure. Arthur started making calls, trying to rally support from other family members, friends, and business associates. He had always been good at convincing people to see things his way, to believe in his vision. But this time, there was no easy solution. He could no longer hide behind his charm or his connections. I had already made sure that the power was out of his hands, and no one in the family would help him, now not after everything he'd done. Sophia, too, was beginning to show her true colors. She wasn't interested in hard work. She wasn't interested in earning her place. She wanted to keep playing the same old game, pretending to be the perfect daughter, the perfect socialite, the perfect image. But that was no longer enough. She would have to learn what it truly meant to contribute, to give back, to show the world that she had more to offer than just her looks and her wealth. For weeks, I watched them struggle. The estate was being transformed, the foundation growing piece by piece. I made sure every aspect was carefully planned, every detail, every decision was in my hands. The project I had envisioned for so long, the Hope Center, was finally becoming a reality. It was a place where women who had been abandoned by their families, women who had been discarded by society, could find dignity and support. It was a place where they could live their lives with the respect they deserved, regardless of age or status. And it was a place that my children were going to have to dedicate themselves to if they wanted any chance at inheriting what was left of my empire. The first week at the Hope Center was a test, a hard, grueling test. Arthur and Sophia showed up, their faces drawn, their eyes filled with frustration and resentment. They were used to comfort, to luxury, to having people cater to their every whim. Now they were being forced to work alongside the women they had once seen as beneath them. They were being forced to do something real, and it wasn't easy. The tasks were simple at first: cleaning, organizing, helping with basic construction, setting up the rooms for the residents. But as the days went on, it became clear that neither Arthur nor Sophia was prepared for the hard work ahead. Arthur, who had spent most of his life making deals behind closed doors, was sweating from the effort of lifting a box, his face red with exertion. Sophia, who had spent years surrounded by luxury, was unable to handle the physical demands of the work. Her hands, which had always been perfectly manicured, were soon covered in dirt and grime. The sight of her delicate hands, now rough and calloused from the work, was a far cry from the woman who had once flaunted her wealth and beauty in front of everyone. They were humbled, but I wasn't about to let them off easy. I knew that true change wasn't going to happen overnight. They had spent their entire lives thinking they were entitled to everything, and now they had to prove they could earn it. I watched them struggle, and I didn't flinch. I let them feel every ounce of discomfort, every bit of frustration, because that was the only way they would truly understand what they had taken for granted. One day, as I walked through the Hope Center, I came across Arthur sitting on a bench, his face buried in his hands. He didn't notice me at first, but when he looked up, I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. His posture was slumped, his body language defeated. I had to admit it was a small victory for me, but I didn't let it show. "How's it going, Arthur?" I asked, casually. My voice calm, though I could feel a sense of satisfaction inside. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the ground, his shoulders hunched, the weight of the world pressing down on him. Finally, he looked up at me, his expression a mixture of frustration and something else, something like realization. "I don't know how you did it," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know how you built this, how you kept everything going for all these years." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. "I always thought I could do it, that I could take over, that I could make everything work the way you did. But I see now that I was wrong." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "It's never been about taking over Arthur. It's about building something piece by piece. It's about doing the hard work. You don't get to just step in and claim what's mine without understanding what it took to get here. This place I gestured around, the Hope Center, now alive with activity, was built on sacrifice, on hard work, on dedication. It's not about the money. It's about respect." He didn't say anything, but I could see that he understood. He had finally realized what he had been missing all these years: the entitlement, the arrogance. It was all gone now, replaced by a quiet humility that I hadn't seen in him before. Sophia wasn't there to witness the moment, but I knew she was struggling too. She had spent the first few days complaining, asking when she could go home, when she could return to her comfortable life. But slowly something began to shift. She started talking to the women in the center. She started asking about their stories, their lives. And while it wasn't much, it was enough to show that she was beginning to understand what true compassion meant. The next few weeks were hard, but I saw the changes in them. They were still far from perfect, but they were trying. They were learning the value of hard work, of caring for others, of putting in the effort without expecting anything in return. One evening, as I walked through the Hope Center, I found Arthur and Sophia working together. They were setting up a new room for the residents, arranging the furniture with a level of care I hadn't seen in them before. They were no longer the entitled children who had expected the world to bow to them. They were becoming something new, something better. As I watched them, I realized that perhaps, just perhaps, there was hope for them yet. The journey was far from over, and there were still many lessons for them to learn, but I was starting to see the glimmer of the people they could become. And that, for me, was enough. For the first time in years, I felt like I was seeing my children for who they truly were, flawed but capable of change. And that was the greatest victory of all. The transformation wasn't just about the estate or the legacy I had built, it was about them. It was about helping them find the respect and humility they had never known. It was about making them understand that true worth is earned, not inherited. And as I watched them continue to work, I knew the Hope Center had done more than just give a second chance to the women it housed. It had given my children a second chance, too. 6 months passed in a blur of hard work, sweat, and unexpected changes. The Hope Center was now a thriving hub of activity. The women who had arrived beaten down by life, by families who had abandoned them, or society that had forgotten them, were beginning to find their voices again. And much to my surprise, my children Arthur and Sophia were finding something too. It wasn't easy for them, not by any means. The work was grueling, the days long, and the rewards, though meaningful, came slowly. But I could see the shifts in them, small, almost imperceptible moments that spoke volumes. They were no longer the entitled children who thought they were entitled to everything. They were becoming something better, something real. Arthur had started taking ownership of the operations of the Hope Center's day-to-day management. It wasn't the kind of work he was used to, but he was finding satisfaction in it, in seeing the change he could help create, in watching the women here find strength in their own way. He was no longer a businessman playing a game of high stakes. Now he was a caretaker, a builder, and most importantly, a person who was learning to give without expecting anything in return. I noticed it most in the way he spoke to the women, the way he no longer viewed them as charity cases, but as people with stories, with dreams. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Sophia, on the other hand, had taken to the emotional wellness programs, something I never would have imagined in her. She had always been more concerned with appearances, with the next big social event, the next designer gown, but now she was connecting with the women on a deeper level. She'd started a weekly art class for them, using painting as a form of expression and therapy. She was there every week, sitting on the floor, helping them find colors, shapes, and words they had long since forgotten. It was clear she was learning something too, not just about others, but about herself. She had begun to soften. The woman who once looked in the mirror and saw nothing but her own reflection now saw others truly saw them. And perhaps more importantly, she was beginning to see herself as part of something bigger, something important, something that mattered. But the true test was yet to come. I had kept them working, kept them focused on the Hope Center, on the mission, and on proving to themselves and to me that they were worthy of the legacy I had fought for. But in the back of my mind, I always knew the final test would be their commitment. I had set the rules. I had laid out the conditions for them to inherit anything from me. They had to prove that they could care about something more than money, more than what they could get. They had to show that they could give work and sacrifice without expecting anything in return. And in 6 months, they would have to decide if they wanted to stay on this path, to continue the work, or walk away. The day I had been dreading arrived with the soft light of morning, just as the garden outside the Hope Center began to bloom with the first hints of spring. I had already spoken to Carla, and the legal documents were prepared. The final decision about their inheritance, about their future, would be made today. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing on my chest as I walked through the building, stopping to talk to a few of the women who had become like family to me. They were flourishing in ways I hadn't imagined possible just a few short months ago. It was their hard work, their determination, their strength that made this place what it was. And it was their presence that reminded me of why I had started this mission in the first place, not just for my children, but for every woman who had been discarded and forgotten. When I reached my office, Arthur and Sophia were already waiting, sitting across from each other in uncomfortable silence. They had clearly prepared for this moment, but I could see the tension in their eyes, the uncertainty about what was coming next. They had changed, at least I hoped they had, but today would be the true test. Today they would show me if they had truly transformed, if they were worthy of what I was about to give them. I closed the door softly behind me and sat down across from them. My heart was heavy, but my resolve was firm. You've both had 6 months to prove yourselves. I began, my voice steady, but carrying the weight of years of sacrifice. 6 months of hard work, of dedication, and of giving without expectation. Now, the choice is yours. Arthur shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but he didn't speak right away. He was trying to read me, trying to figure out what was coming. Sophia, who had always been more emotional, had her hands clasped in her lap, her fingers tapping nervously against her legs. It was clear that this moment meant more to them than anything they had experienced before. They were no longer entitled children hoping for a handout. They were adults facing the consequences of their choices, their actions, and their future. I've watched both of you. I continued, looking at them both in turn. I've watched how you've worked, how you've changed, how you've contributed to this place. I've watched you grow, but I've also seen how much more you still have to learn. They didn't respond, and I didn't expect them to. They were listening, absorbing the gravity of what I was saying. But I wasn't done yet. I gave you a chance, I said, my voice firm. A chance to prove that you were more than just children looking to inherit my wealth. A chance to prove that you could earn your place, that you could carry on the legacy I've worked so hard to build. But now it's time to decide. I reached for the folder on my desk, the one that contained the new will, the one that would determine everything for them. I slid it across the table, watching as both of them leaned forward instinctively, their eyes scanning the papers as they waited for what was to come. The decision is simple, I said. You've both worked here for 6 months. You've both been given a second chance. Now it's up to you. If you choose to stay, if you choose to continue this work, to continue building something that means something, then you will be part of my legacy. I will transfer the estate to you, and you will help me expand the Hope Center, ensuring that it lasts long after I'm gone. You will manage the foundation, you will run this center, and you will take responsibility for the women here, for the lives we're changing. If you choose to leave, if you choose to walk away, then you will walk away from everything. From Harwood Manor, from everything I've worked for. And you will have no claim to anything I've built. The room was silent for a long moment as they both read the will, as the gravity of the decision sank in. Finally, Arthur looked up, his face unreadable. I don't know what to say. He began, his voice low but steady. I've spent my whole life building things, making deals, but I've never done anything like this. I've never done anything that mattered before. He paused, his eyes meeting mine. I'm in. I want to stay. I want to help build this. I want to do something that lasts. Sophia's eyes were full of emotion, her voice shaking as she spoke. I thought I had it all figured out. But you were right. I was living for the wrong reasons. I was living for the image, for the approval of others. But now I see what really matters. I want to stay. I want to help, to make a difference. A wave of relief washed over me. I had expected resistance, I had expected hesitation, but here they were, choosing to stay, choosing to work to earn their place in the world. They had proven themselves to me, to themselves, and to the women in this center. Then it's done. I said, my voice soft but filled with pride. You've earned your place. The Hope Center will continue, and you will lead it. But remember this, I added, standing up and walking over to them. This is not just a business. It's not just about money or property. It's about dignity. It's about giving back. And I expect you both to lead with that in mind. As I left the room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I truly felt like I was leaving behind a legacy worth inheriting. I had raised children who had become adults, who had learned the true value of sacrifice and service. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift I could have ever given them. The Hope Center wasn't just a place. It was a testament to what could happen when people were willing to change, when they were willing to give more than they took. And now, my children were part of that change. They had chosen redemption, and with it they had earned the legacy they once thought they were entitled to. As I reflect on the journey of my story, one thing becomes abundantly clear: it's never too late to redefine who you are and what you stand for. In a world where we're often defined by our past mistakes or circumstances, there's always room for growth and change. Just like my characters Arthur and Sophia, who had to overcome their own pride and entitlement to truly understand what matters, we all have the power to break free from the things that hold us back. It's about finding purpose, giving without expectation, and most importantly, learning to respect the value of hard work and sacrifice. If there's one message I'd like to leave you with, it's this: no matter where you are in life, you have the ability to transform, to change, and to make a lasting impact on the world around you. It might not be easy, and it might not happen overnight, but every step forward, no matter how small, is a step toward becoming the person you're meant to be. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What transformations have you experienced in your life? What steps are you taking to build something meaningful for yourself and those around you? Let's keep this conversation going. Share your thoughts, your experiences, or even your own stories of growth. Thank you for taking the time to read and engage with my story. Your support and involvement mean the world. We're all in this journey of life together, and sometimes the most powerful lessons come when we open up and share with one another. Keep growing, keep evolving, and remember, your legacy is yours to create.